It's 3 minutes after 10. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, for which, of course, I thank you. And I thank you in advance for all the help, the sterling help that you're going to give me this morning with an issue that I can't unravel. I honestly don't know how to do this. If you were kind enough or daft enough to listen to this programme a lot in the period after 2016, then you will know that we became something of a safe haven almost for people who knew what to expect or feared what to expect with regard to Brexit. I don't know that anybody thought it would be as bad as it currently is. Maybe you did. If you did, you were better than me at this. Seriously. I mean, I remember speaking to people like Kieran, the van driver, who's had a nightmare of it recently, trying to get in and out of the country with various cargoes, just as he knew he would. The first person, I think, to introduce us to the phrase carnet, which we now mostly know the meaning of. But so we successfully, if you like, we owned that territory together, didn't we? Where I don't see the problem is even now I'm conscious of not wanting to upset people who don't deserve to be upset, but where the facts mattered more than the feelings, where those who had experience of and understanding of international trade, particularly with the biggest single market in history, were very, very concerned about what we were doing, partly because it looked daft and partly because the people who ended up in charge of it were, I'm afraid, idiots. That is not a technical term. It's just accurate. It's not an opinion. It's just counting. David Davis, ended up Brexit secretary. All these people who have shamed themselves and ruined elements of this country continue to waltz around with complete impunity. That's one of the things I find most extraordinary about the last few years. Jacob Rees-Mogg gets given a TV show by some billionaire plutocrat who also backed Brexit. And all of the things that they said were going to happen haven't happened. And all of the things that they insisted were not going to happen have happened. It's actually mad. I can feel it 6 minutes after 10. I start talking about this on the rare occasions that I do these days. And it's like I turn into a sort of human snowball. Because the more I head down the hill, the bigger I get and the faster I move. Because it's insane, right? There will be no downside to Brexit, said David Davis. On the day after we leave, we will be in Berlin, striking deals with the Germans, which is literally not allowed under the terms of EU membership. The levels of ignorance that these people deployed, I think it's impossible to exaggerate them. I could even sit here now for 20 minutes running through contenders for what the best illustration is of just how stupid these people were and are. Jacob Rees-Mogg talking about how introducing border checks would be an act of national self-harm. For once, in the spirit of a stopped clock, actually being right, but completely failing to mention or understand that the border checks were essentially being introduced as a direct consequence of the Brexit that he said would make trade easier. And you sort of keep it in abeyance, don't you? You sort of keep it in the fridge, unless it's your livelihood, in which case you're probably going slowly mad. If it's your livelihood, you probably marvel. You're supposed to be getting cross this week about rainbow lanyards being worn by civil servants. That has had more attention from government ministers than the fact that, as Thomas just related in that news bulletin, the cost of implementing post-Brexit border arrangements will be at least wait for it, £1 billion. And yet government ministers have had more to say in the last week about civil servants wearing rainbow-coloured lanyards. £5 billion, partly because of delays in implementing it. This isn't me, this is Parliament's own spending watchdog. And it's still not in place. The National Audit Office saying that the strategy lacks a clear timetable and an integrated cross-government delivery plan. Shall I tell you why? You don't need to read this report to work out why. It's because they can't admit anything bad is happening, so they don't acknowledge that it's happening at all. It's an insane situation for a country to find itself in. It genuinely is. This is what I mean about the snowball. This is what I mean about them. Once you actually break the seal, if you like, or open the door to contemplating this scenario, you get bigger and you move faster like a snowball coming down a mountain. I mean, I can't quite do this, A, because it would be pure Alan Partridge, and B, because I don't think anyone could answer it. But when does the snowball stop rolling? What does the end look like in this converse? This continuing denial of reality, or it's not even a denial of reality, because I suppose it's a minor improvement. Not that long ago, you'd have had Nadine Dorries popping up somewhere to say, no, it's not costing £4.7 billion at all. Or you'd have Jacob Rees-Mogg saying, well, you just can't trust the National Audit Office. You must trust me. At least we seem now to have moved away from that actual denial of observable reality into a new era, the era of refusing to acknowledge observable, just pretending that it's not there. Stop and think for a minute. Whatever you think about Brexit, whatever you think about me, whatever you think about any of the people I've just mentioned, how have we become a country in which government ministers talk more about rainbow-coloured lanyards, and their client journalists follow, than they do about the fact that we are currently introducing a regime, a border regime that will make it harder for British businesses than it was before, and we are paying £5 billion for the privilege. I think I could just sit here on a loop and keep repeating that. You could even leave the rainbow lanyards out of it. We, as a country, are in the process of paying at least £5 billion for a border regime that will make it harder for British businesses to do business. Discuss, or rather, riddle me that. Do you know who Jim Ratcliffe is? Jim Ratcliffe was a Brexit-supporting billionaire. They're my favourites, the Brexit-supporting billionaires. Here is a 6-second clip of Sir Jim Ratcliffe saying something that, for me, this weekend seemed to sum up the whole sorry mess.
Well, Brexit sort of unfortunately didn't turn out as people anticipated.
Yes, it did, Jimbo. It turned out exactly as people anticipated, as people explained, and as people desperately sought to make people like you understand. At least the fella's consistent. He's now embarked upon a project to take Manchester United out of Europe. So he appears to have learnt nothing from the experiences of the United Kingdom. And the reason I open this morning with a kind of admission of confusion is because I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Natasha says the ostrich has buried its head under the sofa and found £5 billion while it was down there. And you can see what she means. It's not normal, this. And do you know what I have to do on a morning like this? I have to really gird my loins to dive back into this territory. It would, in normal circumstances, in a normal country, it would be headline news. It would be huge news if we were paying £5 billion to make life harder for British businesses. I'm going to keep hitting you over the head with that. We are paying £5 billion to make life harder for British businesses. Over in Northern Ireland, guess what's happening in Northern Ireland? The government's main post-Brexit scheme for helping traders move goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland will have cost more than £500 million in its first 4 years. This also comes from the National Audit Office. £531 million worth of our money during a cost of living crisis, when we are watching all manner of catastrophe affect all manner of sectors, and we're spending that in the 4 years from December 2020 to December 2024 on the Trader Support Service. So everywhere you turn, there is evidence not only that things are getting worse, but that we are paying a fortune for the inferior scenario. I can't think, and you may be able to, I can't think of any precedent for this in the history of humanity. I have a phrase, a pat phrase, about becoming the first population in history to vote to impose economic sanctions on itself. But I can't think of a precedent for a country spending billions of pounds to make it harder for its businesses to do business. That's the phrase, isn't it? That's the line. Nothing in the Daily Mail today, nothing in Rupert Murdoch's titles, nothing, I don't imagine, from any of my colleagues here who encouraged you to vote for this fiasco. We are spending billions of pounds to make it harder for British businesses to do business. Now, what's the phone in? I haven't got a clue. So some days I think we have to talk about it, but I haven't got a clue what the phone-in is. I've got a clue. It might not work. You could ring me now and just sort of vent your spleen, get it off your chest. I mean, how has this happened? I think we've answered that question. It's happened because we've got a corrupt government and a supine media. Client journalists who are responsible for selling this to the British public now just pretend none of it is happening. We, as a country, are going to keep saying this until it stops being true. We are spending billions of pounds during a cost of living crisis when our national infrastructure is creaking under the strain, and we are spending billions of pounds to make it harder for British businesses to do business. Where does it end? 0345 6060 973. At what point does the snowball stop rolling? At what point does the elephant in the room demand that we acknowledge its existence? What do you think has to happen before the scale of this catastrophe is acknowledged by either, for example, of the main political parties? Labour not doing a great deal. In fact, I have said to you on a few occasions that I would be tickled pink in a way if it was actually a Tory MP after the next election who started making noises from the back benches about the need for some sort of retrenchment, possibly talking about trying to set up a Swiss-style deal, as it were. So what has to happen before this national catastrophe becomes newsworthy outside of my bulletin with Thomas Watts on this programme, one article in one newspaper and a tiny little few paragraphs tucked away in the corner of the Northern Irish section of the BBC website? How does this end? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I mean, we can look at how it's affecting you, but I don't actually think you know for sure yet. You know, I've got a friend who's a greengrocer, and he's keeping me constantly up to date with the vagaries of it. Business will pull through. Business will prevail, if you like. The businesses that survive will find ways to continue doing business. But this is a country which is in the process of spending billions of pounds to make it harder for its own businesses to do business. It is an act of utter insanity. It's a scenario that actually beggars belief, but it's happening under our very noses. And I know why. That's not the question this morning. I know why. It's because we put idiots in charge of a ridiculous idea and reassured them that nobody in the profession that's usually charged with speaking truth to power would dare to say boo to a Brexit goose. So how do you think it ends? How do you think this scenario, this ludicrous situation, breaks? How does the dam break? How does Britain become a place where this is actually talked about? Who's it going to be? Who are the politicians? What is going to happen? What needs to happen for this to become a national conversation somewhere other than right here? Okay? That's your starter for 10 this morning. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. That is the question. It is an obscene scenario that we contemplate, and yet it's one that 80, 90, 95% of the country is refusing even to acknowledge. So what has to happen to turn this ludicrous situation into a national conversation? And I'll take anything you've got, because hand on heart, I haven't got a Scooby-Doo. I haven't got a clue. So what do you think it will be? What does it need? What will it take? Where does it end? 0345 6060 973. 20 minutes after 10 is the time, and it's a simple question, but my goodness me, it's a hard one to answer. The evidence has become insurmountable that Brexit was a bloody stupid idea. What does the beginning of the reverse look like? Where does this end? When do we actually start having frank and open conversations about the stupidity of what we've inflicted on ourselves? And I'm asking this question today because the National Audit Office has reported that it's going to cost us £5 billion to introduce border arrangements that will make it harder for British businesses to do business. If we were having a jingoistic giggle at another country for doing something like this, we'd be in clover this morning. We'd be guffawing our heads off. But no, it's us. and no one's talking about it, except you and me and Sarah in Liverpool. What's going on, Sarah?
Good morning, James.
Good morning, Sarah.
Well, I knew that Brexit would be an absolute and utter, total fiasco, and I hate to say it, I've been proved right. Nice to get that one into the in-laws, I tell you, but that's another story.
No, it's not another story, is it? It's the whole story.
It's the story, yeah. But they were all for it.
And what are they doing now?
Well, believe it or not, my this particular in-law works in the Home Office, and she just loves it.
Oh, gosh.
Well, you know what the Home Office are like, but we'll leave that one again.
Go on. So where do you think this conversation... I mean, we can do it, but we feel a bit like Japanese soldiers sometimes on a Pacific island in 1963 who've just discovered that the war ended in 1945. It didn't end, of course, but we're actually right. But when does the conversation start reaching the parts it needs to reach?
Well, the only way it's going to happen, and I hate to say it, is I've heard it starting up where I live. I'll be perfectly honest, Liverpool, and put it this way, the parts that actually faced out towards the sea in Liverpool, anyway, the parts around Knowsley, they didn't vote to stay in the EU. They voted to leave. But I've heard conversations around Brexit all around Merseyside, and I've heard it all from people from other parts of Britain as well. But people who actually voted for this are suddenly seeing the light.
Are they?
Talking about those on the ground. We're not talking about Esther McVey and Rishi Sunak and...
Esther McVey is the politician, for people who've got better things to do, Esther McVey is the politician who's talking about rainbow lanyards at the moment, just as the country introduces a £5 billion scheme to make it harder for British business to do business. So are you talking about people putting two and two together and coming up with four? So, you know, the stories recently, we're looking at food prices, we're looking at medicines, pharmacies, all of these things that are making life harder for completely avoidable reasons.
Exactly. That's what we've been... Because I've heard so many people...
Are you sure you're not seeing what you want to see, Sarah? You're not hearing what you want to hear?
Believe you me, James.
Well, I do.
I know what I've heard. I've seen it. I've analysed it. I mean, for crying out loud, James. I'm not one of these fanciful people. I'm a scientist, so I analyse everything, even in and out the lab. And this is... I've checked it all over, and I've heard it.
Right.
All
well,
before.
I mean, you as like me, you see, you don't count because you knew it was going to happen. I don't think I knew it was going to be this bad. But
I did.
But did you really? The whole shit. But do you think Project Fear? Do you think Project Fear didn't go far enough?
It didn't, because I've seen and I've heard from various people who, in various sectors, business, science, medicine, all the rest of it.
This is all personal, not anecdotal.
It's
not making the news. Your in-laws aren't reading this in their newspapers. They're not hearing it on the news unless they're listening to this programme, which frankly is unlikely. So, maybe you're right. Maybe the cracks are appearing, but how long is it going to take for those cracks to turn into fissures or big holes? Sam says, sadly, Labour have said no to single market and customs union. They've nailed their colours to the mast. The Tories will wrong foot them with a rejoin offer. It's a possibility, but Stuart takes exactly the opposite view. I'm hoping Starmer is playing a quiet blinder. He's done his little tour of EU leaders last year, so I'm praying that when the dust settles after the election, we'll have another referendum. I think you're both wrong on that, but I can't offer up an analysis that I'd put my own money on. I really can't. Thank you, Sarah. Lee's in Watford. Lee, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hey, James. We spoke last year when I opened a bottle of wine on the first nails of the coffin of this Conservative government, which is not a Conservative government, it's UKIPers.
One year. I like that, Lee. One call a year. I think you're insulating yourself against any accusations of getting on too often. Where do you think this conversation, when does it change?
March next year. Okay,
Why?
Once you have Starmer and Co in power, 200-seat majority. Hopefully, fingers crossed, and I'm an ex-Conservative, and I'm wishing for that every day of my life, right? And we live Frankfurt, London, as a direct result of Brexit, so I personally live it with my family, my daughters, my business and everything. March next year, he can't scare the horses, get in power, start fixing this mess.
But what would that involve? So the first thing it involves is talking about it and saying something like it is ridiculous. I mean, so the problem is we've already lost £5 billion by the time that happens, but it is ridiculous to continue throwing good money after bad, for example.
But 5 billion is nothing once it's fixed for the next 10 years, right? So, this is about single market access. This is about trading relationships. This is about rejoining an adult debate with the EU. The EU has just walked away from Sunak and co, right? They're not talking to them about anything. Look, a government in power with a 5-year mandate, probably a 10-year mandate.
It maybe have 2 election wins, but it'll never have a 10-year. But it can only get a 5-year mandate.
Well, with a 5-year mandate, look, they're going to start actually addressing the problems. I think Starmer, Reeves, and everyone. I think they're going to get there, mate, because it's too obvious. You're doing the counting, I'm doing the counting.
But look how lonely we are.
Counting.
Look how few people are doing it. You people who told, even in this building, there's like half a dozen of my colleagues who said it was all going to go brilliantly, and they don't talk about it at all anymore. I get cross about rainbow lanyards.
I fired 1,800 people in the UK and hired 2,000 in the EU, right? All those 1,800 know exactly what Brexit did to them.
Do they, though?
Well, they lost their job.
Yeah, but they won't think it was Brexit. It was the Ukraine war.
No, they absolutely know
it was COVID. It was COVID.
We told them when we fired them, James.
That it was Brexit.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, and reality is dawning. And look, time is time.
That's 2 for 2. You and Sarah both. I'm pretty exposed on this issue. It's not a conversation I'm shy of having. And you both feel, I sense, you both have an image of the oil tanker that has turned further than I currently think that it has. And to be fair, you're basing it on your conversations with people as opposed to trying to take the temperature of the country via the lens of the client media. Here's a question. Would you vote Tory if they decided to go back in the EU? Well, that was Sam's analysis, wasn't it? The Tories will win an election, and the one after the next one, with a rejoin offer. I don't think we can rejoin. Best we could probably do in the short term is try and negotiate some sort of Swiss-style arrangement, which is considered, well, in many ways inferior to membership, but far superior to what we currently have. It's coming up to 10:29. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. More of your calls to come on this. The number you need is 0345 6060973. I may play you a little bit more of billionaire businessman and prominent Brexit supporter Sir Jim Ratcliffe talking to Sky News yesterday about Brexit not turning out as people anticipated. Those are the moments when I sort of have to take a chill pill. How can somebody, and all right, he made a ton of money doing cars or something, but how can somebody, prominent, public, pro, stand there blithely and say, oh, it's not turned out like we expected, it's not turned out like we predicted? Well, I don't even know what he thought it was going to turn out like. The most cursory understanding of the inevitable consequences should have taught him, as a, superstar businessman, should have taught him exactly how things were going to turn out. But no. And that's why the question today is about when that actual dam breaks, and the conversation becomes national rather than merely confined, I hesitate to say this, but merely confined to a kind of grim and very uncelebratory I told you so. Thomas Watts has your headlines. It is 10:33. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Maybe this is significant. We're talking a little bit anecdotally, aren't we, about what gives you confidence that the conversation will change. I'm afraid I don't necessarily share that conversation, but it's very slim pickings in Idiot's Corner today. I kind of reserve a little bit of the programme for reading out texts from people who probably shouldn't be allowed near scissors. And, I mean, historically, in many ways, Brexit was the mothership of Idiot's Corner, wasn't it? People who used to ring in with absolute certainty that it was a brilliant thing to do and couldn't answer a question. Usually, I hesitate to say this out loud because it sort of gives the game away a bit. But I do wonder sometimes, if I hadn't come up with that question, which law are you most looking forward to having to obey anymore? You sort of reflect on the fact there's a good few 100,000 more people listening to this programme today than there was in 2016. Obviously, it sort of impacts in all corners of my life and career. If I hadn't come up with that question, those clips, and they hadn't put the cameras in the studio around that time for completely different reasons, they were supposed to be here to film politicians being interviewed by Nick and Ian and others. And for some reason, I've never fully understood. Me talking to people on the phone and asking them what law it is they're most looking forward to not having to obey anymore, and then falling apart like a cheap suit. They were halfway around the world before the lies had got their trousers on. Ended up on the front page of the New York Times, those viral clips. So who knows if that had never happened. So I can speak with some confidence about Idiot's Corner. Nothing in there today. There's one message saying, ha ha ha, still crying after 8 years. To which you can't even respond with irritation, can you? Or anger. You just think, oh, you poor soul. I mean, what is it that you're celebrating? I presume you're a massive racist, but immigration's gone through the roof, so that's not really what's happened either. What is it that you're celebrating? What is it that needs to happen before this conversation extends beyond this studio? 0345 6060 973. Nick's in Winchester. Nick, what would you like to say?
Yes, good morning, James. Well, my view is that Brexit is costing us a fortune, and people
That's not a view. That's not an opinion. That's counting.
Yeah, well, we should go back in. That's the way to do it. The gap in our economy is 100 billion plus. The gap in the Treasury finances, that's 40 billion plus. That's 7p on your basic level of income tax. There's Jeremy Hunt making a big song and dance that he's given us a 2% cut in national insurance. Well, with all the money Brexit is costing us, a right-wing chancellor, if he was minded, could waste 7p on a tax cut, or a progressive chancellor could use 7p of income tax to rebuild broken public services. James, I'm the chief executive of the European Movement, UK, which has existed for 75 years. We spent our first 25 years campaigning to get into the EEC as it was then, and it looks as if we're going to spend our next few years campaigning to get back to the heart of Europe and to plug this awful gap in our economy and our national life.
When do you think the conversation then will move beyond not just this studio, but obviously your purview as well, and into what I guess we would have to refer to as the mainstream? When will it happen? Because today's an interesting day, isn't it?
It is.
It's a day on which the figures are published, and we learn that we are paying at least £5 billion to introduce a border regime that makes it harder for British businesses to do business.
Yep,
it defies any claim to commercial acumen, to being a party of business, to being patriotic, to being whatever nonsense. I suppose they could argue it's more important to have sovereignty, but you know and I know that's gibberish. It's a remarkable moment, and yet it is being marked hardly anywhere.
Yes, it's ridiculous. The EU did the equivalent bits for their border in 2021.
Yes,
effortlessly and seemingly without any great kerfuffle. We have kept putting it off and kept putting it off. It's total incompetence, and this is all to put in place something that will be damaging to us in any case. It is completely ridiculous.
So when do you think?
Into a new parliament, none of the parties want to mention is at the election. I have to say, in fairness to the parties, they do polling, we do polling. Our polling is telling us that the public isn't really ready yet to reopen the whole wound. There's still a sense of national, I think, PTSD from the divisions of the last one.
Yes.
But a new government with a positive attitude, trying to iron out some of the problems, sitting down in a constructive way with the EU and getting mutually beneficial outcomes, I think that will deliver some momentum. It'll make the people see that when you sit down sensibly with Europe, you get somewhere, and you'll normalise the issue, you'll detoxify it. And I would hope that gradually and a step at a time, we'll get back to a position.
Whatever the opposite of boiling a frog is turning the heat down and revivifying the frog somehow. I mean, it's a bit chicken and egg, this, isn't it? Because for the political mood to shift, the way you describe it, Nick, you don't think that the public mood needs to shift first? I'm interested in what's the tail and what's the dog here.
It's a very good question, and that's really where the European movement comes in. I mean, we know that we're not going to get back into Europe until the British government takes a monumental gamble of opening an accession process, and the EU is willing to take us back, believing that it's the settled will of the British
That's a crucial point. That's a crucial point. It's got to be so far in the opposite direction from Brexit,
Yes.
that it isn't even febrile. They're not going to want to be involved in yet another round of national division
Exactly.
and rancor, are they?
They're not. I mean, if it looks as if the opposition, let us say a Labour government, applied to join. If the Tories are still against it, well, they're not going to want in Europe another in-out, shake it all about UK psychodrama. It's got to be the settled will of the UK that we want back in, and
So
that's going to take time.
It's a generation away then.
I don't know it's as long as 20 years, but I think it's certainly not something that can be achieved in one 5-year parliamentary
Not in one
term.
pot, no. And of course, perhaps the metric changes if the public understanding and the public appetite for it increases exponentially for reasons that neither of us could currently confidently predict. Can I tell you something funny? You'll appreciate this, but I don't know that everybody else will. So while you were talking, I was just looking for the Goldman Sachs research from, I think, February of this year, looking at the size of the blow to our economy that Brexit will inflict. And they talk about the UK economy being about 5% smaller than it would have been if we'd stayed in the European Union. And of course, when Rishi Sunak was an analyst at Goldman Sachs, these were precisely the sort of forecasts and analyses that he would rely on to make his trades. I mean, it's incredible to think that his fortune, which I'm delighted to report went up by 120 million pounds last year, his fortune, the bits that don't come from his wife, is built upon trades made based on Goldman Sachs expertise. And Goldman Sachs expertise now tells us that the economy is 5% smaller than it would have been. So while I'm looking for that article, Nick, so I could get my figure correct, I accidentally stumbled across news from April of this year, from the end of last month, telling me that Goldman Sachs, one of the world's leading investment banks, has recently made the strategic decision to relocate a senior banker to Paris as part of its post-Brexit revamp, raising concerns about the broader implications for London businesses, particularly in terms of access to bank services and financing. So even when you're looking for the story of one disaster, you stumble across, for people who insisted that the city wouldn't be affected at all, you stumble across another one.
I know, and you can see examples of this everywhere, but, it was all about taking back control. That's not really worked out very well, has it?
Controlling our borders.
Can't even organise a border. It was supposed to be about national sovereignty. Well, I reckon we've got less sovereignty now than we had when we were in there, because anyone anywhere in the world who wants to sell into the European market, the world's most lucrative market, doesn't matter if they're American, Indian, Chinese, Japanese, they have to abide by those market rules. So do we, and we used to help make them. And we used to be a rule maker, and now we're a rule taker.
That's possibly the best example of it doing the exact opposite of what was promised, is that we have become something that we weren't before, and yet the people who agitated to leave told the British public that they were rule takers, not rule makers. The polar opposite was true, and yet the polar opposite has now become reality. Thank you, Nick. European Movement doing great work for 75 years. Good Lord. Gravity, really, just in terms of recognising the size of the market and its potential significance to this country. And now we're erecting £5 billion worth of barriers to make that trade harder. 10:43 is the time. And that Goldman Sachs thing I'd missed, and I do this for a living. There was a lot of talk about an exodus from the city, which was never going to happen the next day. But arguably the world's leading investment bank has now made a strategic decision to relocate a senior banker, to which you're perfectly entitled to respond by going, so what, I don't care, I'm not a banker. But remember, the people who you trusted told you that wouldn't happen. That's, I think, the crucial lesson, if you like, of Project Fear. Mark's in Mill Hill. Mark, what do you think?
Hi, James.
Hello,
Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
There's basically, you're asking the key question, which is, how does the dam break?
When does the conversation change?
Yeah, I think it changes at 2 points. Firstly, at a sort of economic level, it changes because if you look at exports in the proper way, if you look at it from a volume based,
you mean goods rather than services?
Yeah, well, both actually.
Yes.
If you look at CVM exports, so what do they call that? Constant volume measures, as opposed to current prices, which has got inflation.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Actually, the...
But you've already lost the room.
Okay, but...
It's too dry. It's too dry. How's it going to hit me when I'm in Morrison's?
Oh, no. This is a Westminster level. So at a Westminster level, if exports aren't growing, the economy isn't growing. If the economy isn't growing, you're not generating new taxes, and you can't rebuild public services. So that's what happens at a Westminster level. At a personal level, what hits you is a mass event. And in my opinion, that will be when the visa systems kick in, EES and ETIAS, when those kick in. And
you mean holidays? People going on holiday having to jump through hoops.
And also people just going for, travelling across the water to for business, on a day trip.
So the harder that gets, then the more acute. The only problem with that is that it's in the interests of the destinations to make it a little bit easier. Do you see what I mean? Because albeit that they think that Brexit is a stupid idea, that they would quite like to minimise the amount of friction and bureaucracy that it takes, for example, to bus in plane loads of British tourists. So
that's absolutely true, and you can do that at a national level.
Yeah.
But at the EU level, at the supranational level, it's still going to require ETIAS and EES.
And all you have to say is more fuss than it would have done before. Even if they work to minimise the fuss, for the reasons I've just explained, even if they work to minimise the fuss, it's going to be more fuss than before. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe those queues. I mean, you'll get some joker responding saying that's not true. I went to Lanzarote last week and I walked straight through customs, and that's fine. But it doesn't mean that the 100 people queuing up over there in the non-EU queue while everybody with an Irish passport flies past them, including on occasion members of the same family in different queues, that may begin to impact people. That's like the osmosis, isn't it? The intellectual osmosis by which you just sort of absorb through a semi-permeable membrane the thought that this is a really silly thing to have done. You could be right. On the other side of the argument, Kemi Badenoch was described in the newspapers this weekend as having identified a new Brexit benefit. Can you guess what it was? Do you know what this is? The new Brexit benefit, as established by Secretary of State for Business, Kemi Badenoch. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll tell you what that Brexit, and it's going to be very, very exciting, and it will really stick it to Johnny Foreigner. This thing that we can do now, according to Kemi Badenoch, that we couldn't do before, and that EU countries can't do. Well, hold on to your hat. I'll give you the lowdown after this. It is 10 minutes to 11. It appears some of you already knew about the Brexit freedom, as she prefers to call it, the Brexit freedom that Kemi Badenoch has identified. Would you like to know what it is? Shall I give you a clue? I'll give you a clue. Lily Allen rhymed it once with Tesco. Anybody? I believe it is called al fresco. Al fresco. Outdoor dining. Pavement dining to become a permanent feature of the high street as Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch announces plans to remove red tape for pubs, restaurants and cafes to make the most of Brexit freedoms. So if you're listening to this in gay Paris or perhaps Venice or, I don't know, perhaps on an Austrian, a Viennese boulevard, if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, God, wouldn't it be nice if we could sit outside and have a noisette or have a plate of pasta? Wouldn't it be lovely to visit Rome and be able to eat outside on the... Wouldn't it be glorious to visit Saint-Tropez and have perhaps a glass of wine on the Esplanade? Well, you can't because you're in the EU. And thanks to Kemi Badenoch and Brexit freedoms, we're going to be eating outside in rain and snow and all sorts of things. I mean, how? And of course, inevitably, it's the Mail that printed that gibberish headline. Pavement dining to become a permanent feature to make the most of Brexit freedoms. And not for the first time, it is, of course, the satirists that you feel sorry for. Liz in Cricklade, or Liz Webster, as she is introduced on other shows that ring her, well, I just sit here arrogantly waiting for her to ring me, is, as you will know, the head of Save British Farming. And I think it's fair to say one of the very few people who is much further down the road of reversal than I think we are as a country. So I'll ask you the same question, Liz. What's going to change before the conversation reaches the sort of levels that you clearly believe it should have reached weeks or months, if not years ago?
Well, it's going to be food panic. They spent 3.5 years using mostly imports from Europe to put us out of business. Then we've had the worst weather ever in the last 18 months.
Talking about British farmers now.
Farming, yeah. And I know people think farming is a hobby, but we mostly actually feed the British people, or we had been doing that. So the government policy has been running down British farming. The weather has, and Brexit has. And just as things are getting to a crisis point for food production here, this government have brought in these checks to make things even worse. I mean, I feel like Penelope Pitstop, actually, against Dick Dastardly and Muttley in a race, because they keep doing these things and make it look as if it's a he mistake. But I'm sorry, it can't. They know what's coming on. They're speaking to farmers, and it's the most negligent and dangerous thing that they're doing. They're cooking, real problems. And I'm guessing they're hoping that as Labour come into power, it's going to, really hit a crisis point.
And how do we then step back from that crisis point? What, in policy terms, in the short term, would alleviate? Because, I mean, no one's suggesting you can change the weather. But in terms of the things that would make life easier for farmers, even as they deal with the other variables.
Well, I mean, this is the stupidest thing about Brexit. They talk about sovereignty. As far as I'm concerned, a country that can't feed itself doesn't have sovereignty. None of us can survive without food. And so what they've done with Brexit is make us more reliant on Europe. I told this to Nigel Farage in his show last week when he replied it's insanity. That is what's going on.
I didn't share that clip because I hate to give him any promotion whatsoever. Maybe that's a mistake, because you go on these programmes and you basically hand them their backsides in a gift wrapped with a bow on top. But does it change anything, Liz? I know you know I'm a big fan of viral tweets and the rest of it. But does it change anything when you do things like that?
Well, of course, because it's pointless at all speaking to each other in the same bubble of it, agreeing with it. When the people that love Nigel, I want to reach.
Yes, fair enough.
And that's the whole point. And if I'm nasty to Nigel, I mean, I like Nigel. I think he's quite good fun. But I just don't agree with his ideology. But ultimately, this is about all of us. And the richer you are, the less problems
the more insulated you are from all of the problems, and because you're not going to even notice that you're paying more for everything. What though, in policy terms, what could they do? Because
it's very difficult for us to ramp up production in the time needed. The only way to do it is to release the trade barriers. And if Labour had any sense,
but then they would need to sign up for some sort of regulatory alignment, right?
Yes, we need
which
dynamic
is fine,
alignment.
and it's not going to hurt anyone. It's just that it's become an ideological kind of hill on which these idiots are prepared to die.
It's the right-wing press want to use it in the election to say, we told you he's a secret Remainer. Right. I honestly believe that people would prefer to have food sovereignty. It's national
food sovereignty is a good phrase. Are you not encouraged by the news regarding razor clams?
I've long gone beyond being encouraged, and at the moment we're spending most of the time trying to get all of our maize drilled before the rain comes back. Or it'll probably be a drought now. But
be careful what you wish for. Anna Firth, I think, is the name of the Conservative MP who said that we found razor clams in the River Thames, and that was a Brexit benefit. Could that not plug some of the holes in our food production and supply that you describe?
Well, the British people don't eat a lot of shellfish, so I doubt they're going to be going
it's time they bloody started, Liz. Frankly, they're not going to have much choice in the matter soon.
There's even less rabbits around than there used to be, but there's plenty of squirrels. There are actually plenty of deer, but
and of course, as you know better than anyone, it's that final connection, that final synaptic connection that is hard to guarantee, particularly given the state of the media that you allude to. So you walk into Morrison's, you see empty shelves, or you notice the price of, at the moment, olive oil is probably the most nuclear in terms of prices going up. It will be expensive everywhere. There are shortages, but it will be more expensive here because of the £5 billion worth of trade barriers that we've erected on our own borders. So always see Brexit as a magnifying glass, not necessarily as the cause of a problem. Liz mentions the weather. So the weather causes problems. But Brexit creates or adds to the problems that already exist. So will you put the two and two together when you're looking at your shelves in Sainsbury's and either wondering where your food is or wondering why it's so expensive? And some of the answer to both of those questions will be Brexit. But are people ready to go there? You've got politicians shouting Ukraine and COVID at every opportunity, which have also caused problems. That's the point. They are also magnifying glasses for existing problems. But when will we be ready to actually call the B word the B word? Thank you, Liz. Venki's in Croydon. Venki, what would you like to say?
Thank you very much for taking my call, James. Big fan of yours.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
I have sort of literally one point, which is, while we might be shouting and saying, hey, when will it become visible to our population that we want to go back? Labour comes in, they do some sort of a move of saying, yes, this is the way that we will move forward slowly, stealthily, whatever it takes. The thing that I can't understand is, why would Europe allow us to come back? And let me sort of try and explain or expand on that point. I work in the sort of finance/IT sector, kind of in the middle of the high-tech area. And around sort of just before 2016, and I've been working in that field for almost 20 years now. And just around sort of just before 2016, the usual route for any organization, any company that has grown above a certain size, high-tech firms, financial firms, hedge funds, IT sector, Silicon Valley companies, the first point when they grow above a certain size, when they want to come into Europe, they will first come to London. That was by default.
Yes.
That is just by default. That's the first place they invest in. London, Southampton, some parts of Manchester, and so on and so forth. So they will bring an office, they will start the company here, and they will say, we will expand from here into Europe. From 2016 to 2020, it was kind of status quo. Everyone was like, let's wait a little bit and let's see what happens. They would look at us when I go and speak to my peers in Europe. They would look at us with a little bit of astonishment, but also with a little bit of what did happen. It's almost like one of those things where you have a you have a beloved aunt who's just had a divorce, and you say, "Oh, poor you, it's going to get better." Is that sort of what that used to be the sentiment? Consoling.
We're going to run out of time. So you're going to have to hurry to the punchline. Forgive me.
So from 2020 onwards, what I have noticed is that almost all of these organizations have now stopped investing in the UK. They've just completely stopped. And none of these organizations quickly invest for the short term. They're all looking at the long term. And all of this investment, the investment that's going into Milan, Amsterdam, Rome, Paris, I couldn't believe it, Paris. All of this investment that is going over there, why would the EU want us back?
Well, I will leave that question hanging. I mean, the answer is 55 to 60, 70 million customers now. Of course, that's one answer. But of course, I think as an earlier caller, I think it was Nick alluded to from the European movement, the febrility of the debate needs to have dissipated. They're not going to want to be sitting there waiting for us to start biting more chunks out of each other for a couple of years before the process is finally over. They won't. I mean, accession plus referendum, that referendum won't happen in this country until it's 80-20 in the opinion polls. I honestly believe that, and I don't want to sound pessimistic, especially not for people like Liz, but there's so many other variables here over which we have absolutely no, wait for it, control. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. I think I probably owe you an apology. I did a little bit of the coverage in the last hour was suboptimal. I kept hitting you with the 4.7 or 5 billion pounds that we are spending on a border that will make life harder for British businesses. But the National Audit Office also posits a cost of 7.5 billion pounds per year in costs that will have to be met by the firms doing business. So the 5 billion is for the wall, and then there's 7.5 billion pounds that everyone who has to get their goods over that wall will have to pay. Not to mention the hundreds of millions of pounds wasted on facilities that were never actually used. That's what happens when you put people like Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg in charge of things. So you've got 5 billion quid essentially being spent on making it harder for British businesses to do business. That's the checks, the border regime. 7.5 billion quid a year that the firms will have to pay to negotiate the new border regime. And hundreds of millions of pounds wasted on facilities that were never used. Well done. Well done, everybody. And remember, everybody knew exactly what they were voting for. Now, some good news. There is one measure that has made the news in the last few days by which we are world-beating. We are truly, by some distance, the best performer. If you look at the chart or the graph, we are way ahead of everybody else in the developed world. These are statistics that have been published by the OECD. And we, the UK, pushed Belgium into a very, very distant second place. And then other countries, including Portugal, New Zealand, Canada, are way behind us. Absolutely miles behind us. We're almost double the second place country. So high is the figure for the UK. Do you know what graph I'm looking at? Do you know what it is, where it is, in what field it is that the United Kingdom and England in particular, because it has the most complete data out of the 4 UK nations, but if anything, the situation in the other 3 nations will be worse. But looking overall at the UK, do you know what it is that we don't just beat the world at, but absolutely smash them? We destroy them. We ruin them. The rest of the world isn't just eating our dust. So far behind us do they trail, but they can barely see us. We're so far ahead. Do you know what it is? It's not sewage. It's a good suggestion. It probably is sewage, but that's not the graph that I'm actually looking at. It's not incompetent politicians, and it's not child poverty. Although, again, if someone bothered to put together that graph, we probably would be ahead of the field. Thomas is a man after my own heart. Potholes, he suggests. Another vote for child poverty. Jack points out poor mental health. We've done that recently, Jack. And indeed, by 2 measures, we were pretty much the worst in the world. On one measure, we were the worst, and on another one, we were a little bit just pipped at the post by Uzbekistan, I believe. We were second bottom. But no, it is none of these things. Quite a few of you have got it. John's got it. Anthony's got it now. It's not teabags, Daryl. Please take this seriously. And Sam has got it as well. The answer is homelessness. And this is a conversation we've never had before. We've had a conversation about homelessness before, but I have always conducted it with reference to people sleeping on the streets, with reference to people or sleeping in their own vehicles. That became a fairly depressing motif a couple of years ago when we turned our attention to homelessness. A couple of working people, men on both occasions I can remember, working men sleeping in their van or their car because they had lost their home, or they'd had to move out of the family home and they couldn't afford anywhere else. So it's not about people sleeping rough. This is not about rough sleeping, which is a subject that I will most definitely return to, I promise you, but not today. Because what this story is about, and the statistics are, truly staggering, actually. This is about people living in temporary accommodation. And you would presume, I think, that America would do worse than us. No, not even close. America is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th. It goes UK, Belgium, France, Czech Republic, Germany, America. These would be the 20 most developed nations. And if Belgium is coming in at just over 30, the rate of homelessness per 10,000 people, we're past 50. It is an absolutely stunning graphic, and it's John Byrne Murdoch at the Financial Times, who I think is probably my favourite journalist, because, when I say that's not an opinion, that's counting. He literally just counts. He does statistics in such a way that they are easy to digest and, on occasions such as this, profoundly important. Profoundly important. So I think if you'd asked me whether we were worse or better than America, I would have said better. I might have put us second. Some of these former Eastern European countries you might have thought would be performing worse than us just because of historical wealth issues. But America is not even close to being the worst. The worst is the UK. The worst is the UK. This is homelessness, not rough sleeping. And I think it's one of those mornings just to wonder what it's like. I mean, how comfortable do you have to be confident that it could never happen to you? You know, I've been fascinated by this all my life. Martin Amis, the author, the late author, used to talk about tramp angst. He called it tramp angst. And he talked about how he had it and some of his friends didn't. So he was, I think, one of, if not the most successful author of his generation, literary author of his generation. But he still had tramp angst long after achieving success. And by tramp angst, he meant dropping off the ladder, as it were, worrying that. And obviously, when I use the word tramp, I'm bringing rough sleeping into the picture, but that's a figure of speech. He believed it was possible for the wheels to come off his financial situation to the degree that he'd lose everything he had. And other people don't have it. My wife doesn't have it, and I do. I think I've just about come out of it now, but certainly when I started doing this job, and even 10 years ago, I still had it. I still had a fear. I think maybe therapy helped, actually. I'd never clocked that one up before as yet another benefit, but I still had a fear of losing everything. Like an anxiety dream type fear, that kind of bolus in the pit of your stomach that you would wake up with sometimes. So I thought it was possible. And if you lost everything, or if you lost your home as a family, you wouldn't be sleeping in shop doorways with your children. It usually would be single males that ended up falling completely through the cracks. For the massive majority of us, we would turn to the authorities. And that is where the main form of homelessness in this country exists. It's temporary accommodation. And 1 in 200 households in this country now live in emergency lodging outside the formal housing sector. I'm not even sure what that means. I presume it means just non-permanent. So you're in very temporary accommodation or some sort of B&B or repurposed hotel. The editor of the Financial Times, who picks her favourite stories every week in a rather splendid newsletter, wrote at the weekend, there is a certain out-of-sight, out-of-mind quality to temporary accommodation, but it accounts for more than 80% of homelessness across the OECD. Hundreds of thousands of people across the developed world live this peripheral and fragile existence, and Britain's record is dire. So, why? 0345 6060 973. On the plus side, I can tell you that Rishi Sunak's personal fortune and his wife's went up by £120 million last year. So it's not all bad news, On the one hand, we've got the worst homelessness record in the free world, and on the other, the country's governed by a man who's got more money than any human being could ever need. And he's got £120 million more than he had this time last year. So, swings and roundabouts. But, I mean, why are we so bad at this? Why are we so much worse? It has perhaps inevitably more than doubled since David Cameron became Prime Minister in 2010, or in common parlance, it's more than doubled since the Tories got in. But I want to know the what of it more than the why today. I want to know what happens. I know it's not going to be an easy phone call to make, and I know it's borderline patronising when I say to you, especially if you thought that this could never happen to someone like you. I just think somehow those are the stories that better highlight the scale of the problem. I never thought this would happen to me and my family, James. So, you ran out of road. You couldn't keep the home you were in. Either a landlord pulled the plug, or your finances failed to keep up with your costs. Might be Liz Truss's fault, of course. Could be any number of things. Unemployment, illness, whatever it was, the family home disappeared, ceased to be something you could stay in, right? And you had nowhere else to go. What happens? What actually happens? Who do you talk to? Where do you go? That first night, where do you sleep? What is the reality of giving back the keys, is a good way of putting it, despite not having a new home to go to, all right? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And of course, what is it like? The temporary accommodation. Is it wrong of us to sit here presuming that it's pretty grim? And how long is temporary? What would it do to a child to be moving around a lot, you know? There's something about certainty that is secure, isn't there? I don't know whether it qualifies as a form of separation anxiety, but not having a bedroom or not having a bed to call your own. Why are we so bad in this field? What is it like? The process in which you become temporarily homeless. And then finally, what is it like to be temporarily homeless? Where do you go? Who do you talk to? Who's in charge? How much agency do you have? How long do you stay in a given place? Anything you've got on this? Because this conversation is conducted, I for good or for ill, I take full responsibility for this. It's conducted from a place that recognises that for the massive majority of people listening, the plausibility of the wheels coming off is actually real, whether you realise it yourself or not. As you usually say, we're 2 paychecks away from disaster or 2 paychecks away from oblivion. I don't know why. I have always felt that vulnerability in ways that people who maybe aren't as well off as I am don't feel that. I've always felt that vulnerability. And that's where this conversation today is coming from. What's it like? Because I think the same thing, you know, when floods happen. We've done it as a phone-in, haven't we? What do you do if you have to move out of your home because of a flood? Where do you go? I see the news. I know you spend the first night in a sports centre, but what happens next? You wait for the insurer to pick up a hotel. Who finds the hotel? How much can you pay? All of those things, but not in the context of flooding today. In the context of temporary accommodation. Not sleeping rough. Apologies if you feel excluded, but I promise you we have and we will address your situation together. This is specifically about temporary accommodation, the main form of homelessness. And as I say, especially if you're a family or someone who just never thought this kind of thing could happen to you. I want to learn as much between now and 12 o'clock as together as we humanly can, all right? Here's the number that you need to join in. We'll ring you straight back. It's 0345 6060 973. And of course, if you're lucky enough not to have personal experience, maybe you can have a swing at why it has become so appallingly bad in this country, specifically or particularly over the last 14 years. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 21 minutes after 11 is the time. Brendan says, the question you're asking, James, informs the only metric that matters, in my opinion. The gap between the rich and the poor is getting wider by the day. And then, would you believe, in the same window, in the same 60-second slot, in the same minute at 11:19, someone else wrote, why do you keep telling us how rich the Prime Minister is? And then in capital letters, pathetic. I was going to be sarcastic and say, look, the reason why I keep mentioning that Rishi Sunak got £120 million richer last year is because there's so much bad news around. And I thought that would be good news. But I did a bit of sarcasm earlier about Kemi Badenoch claiming that being able to eat outside is a Brexit freedom. And I got a message, a lovely message from someone. I'm afraid I've lost it, so I can't remember your name. He said, please don't put me in idiot's corner, James, but I'm confused. I ate out every day in Ibiza last summer. I said I was being sarcastic. It is clearly not a Brexit freedom that allows us to eat al fresco, which, did you realise, actually rhymes with Tesco. 22 after 11 is the time. What's it like? What's it like? The temporary accommodation. We've all got an image, whether it's accurate or not, of what sleeping rough looks like. But what's the sort of last level of net before you slip through the cracks? What is that actually like? Because I can't believe these figures. We are by far the worst in the world when it comes to the rate of homelessness, the worst in the developed world by far. Which is mad, really, isn't it? Because we look after our own in this country. You know, it's the foreigners we don't like, it's the refugees. You know, all that lot. They're always going on about how we should look after our own. Mm-hmm. Barry's in Braintree to kick things off. Barry, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. My girlfriend's just recently been made homeless. She sort of knew about the eviction for I think the last 6 months or so.
Right.
Was on the council. Obviously, she went to the council when she got the notification that she would be evicted.
That's because the landlord wanted them out.
Yeah, they wanted them out. Yeah, she'd been there sort of 8-9 years.
Okay.
The landlord wanted them out. So he's gone to the courts and whatever. It wasn't a nasty, because to be honest with you, he was even saying if she can get somewhere within the next sort of couple of weeks of the eviction date, he would let her stay.
Sure, but he wants to sell.
Yeah, he wants to sell, basically. So she went to the council, and because she was working 2 days a week, she didn't qualify for any council accommodation.
Okay.
So what's happened is they've put her into temporary accommodation at the moment, and they're trying to help her get back onto the private renting.
What's the temporary accommodation like?
It's kind of, well, to be honest with you, she just sent me a photo of it, and it looks like a self-contained studio flat.
Okay.
But I've not actually been there myself yet. It looks quite tidy from the photos that she sent me. But there are rules, you know, that you can't go out before a certain time. You've got to be in by a certain time.
What is it then? Is it some sort of hostel then?
I believe so. Yeah, right. That's what I believe so. Like I say, I've seen the photos today, and she has got her own toilet facilities, shower, kitchen bits and pieces.
And do you know why? I mean, why is that not permanent? I mean, I'm coming at this from a position of complete ignorance, Barry, and you may not be the best qualified guide to help me. So if you don't know the answer to a question I ask you, just say so. But
no problem.
So the business is run as a temporary accommodation site, presumably, because you're speaking now, and I'm thinking, well, why can't she stay there for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, it is just literally just as temporary accommodation until they
because they will charge
out.
More per night, I imagine, than they would do if it was being rented out as a permanent property.
Yeah, I mean, I've not actually seen it, but there are rules and everything, so I can imagine it must be, I don't know, maybe in a block of flats with a warden controlled. I'm not too sure, but she's still working, and one of the rules is that you can't be out before 7 o'clock, but she starts at 6.
So that's tricky. And how long does she stay there for, do you know?
Until something else comes up.
As in a permanent spot for her to... Has she got children?
Yeah, she's got children, yeah.
So the children are there as well?
Yes.
And that's why that will be partly why they found her somewhere, won't it? Because
exactly.
If it was you on your Todd, I don't know that you...
No chance.
No, you wouldn't be prioritised. Okay, it's a crazy business. I hope it works out for her. 26 minutes after 11 is the time. I got that phrase I use quite a lot about things you know nothing about until you need to know everything. But there are some cliff edges you just don't really like looking over. You sort of think, well, what would happen if I lost the house? Where would I go? Who would I call? Siobhan's in Gravesend. Siobhan, what can you tell us?
Hi. It was a few years ago, but I came out of a very violent marriage. I had 3 children. No, that's fine. And my house was repossessed, basically, because I couldn't afford the mortgage on my own. And the thing is, when you know your house is going to be repossessed, and I think it was around 6 weeks, you go to the council, but they can't do anything really until the bailiffs have come and, put the letter on the door and actually repossess the house.
Right.
So that leaves you with a quandary of where do I put all my property? I've got no time to plan. Where am I going to end up? And I was working full time as well as a carer at the time. Right. So I went to the council. I'd managed to put all my stuff in friends' garages and sheds and...
Really? Just box it up and stick it wherever you can find a space?
Yeah, I mean, at 10 in the morning, we were sitting outside the property with all of our furniture in the front garden, all of our belongings.
It's quite Dickensian, isn't it, Siobhan, if you don't mind me saying so? You're in Dickens country, of course, in Gravesend, but that is not something you... I mean, I can't imagine you ever thought you'd find yourself in that situation.
No, well, I did think when I plucked up the courage to left, this is what,
Right.
this is, on another subject, why,
No,
one of
it's
the
linked.
reasons why you stay with people like that,
Of course.
because... So,
Of course.
A house was found. I knew the area; it wasn't too far. They were prefabricated houses that were supposed to be demolished about 20 years before.
Right.
Not great, single glazed. It was February. The house was actually colder inside than it was outside. At some points, it wasn't pleasant, but it was a roof, but something that.
And was that temporary?
That was temporary, but something I can guarantee you probably don't know is that because I was working, I had to pay rent, but there was also a £50 a week admin fee for being homeless.
Was it owned by a private company then?
No, it was a council house.
That's insane. Because you had a job. And how long did you stay there for?
6 months, and there were times I really struggled to pay the rent. There were times I didn't eat. The children, had everything that they needed. But they would, I had a very unpleasant council officer, and he would turn up on a Friday and say, if the rent's not in by midday, I'm coming round later with bailiffs, and that happened most weeks, and it was suggested to me that
yeah, go on, sorry.
It was suggested to me that perhaps I should give up work. And actually, in retrospect, pride stopped me doing that. But I can fully see why. Because they said I was the only full-time working tenant they'd had in homeless accommodation for years. So it's not really something they normally had to account for.
So the system wasn't necessarily tooled to accommodate you, which is madness in and of itself. And this was a while ago, as you've said, because looking at the numbers now, it certainly is not uncommon now for people in full-time work to be finding themselves in temporary accommodation. And since 2010, as I say, that the overall figure has doubled. Hi, James. Thank you, Siobhan. I'm glad you're in a better place now. Please don't read out my name. You must get that at the top of a text, by the way, because otherwise, if you put it at the end, sometimes I'm reading it out loud and I get to the end of the text and it says, please don't read out my name, and I already have. So I didn't read out this name. And I get why you don't want me to. I've been living in temporary accommodation for coming up to 10 years now. It's the unknown for me, the not knowing whether I'll ever have a forever home. I sold my parents' home to pay for their care, which left me and my daughter homeless after our landlord sold the property we were living in. As a disabled person who requires a wheelchair-adapted property, they're just not available, so I'm stuck in a constant limbo. We've moved twice just because of mould and damp to the point where it was affecting my mental health. It's sad and depressing. Thank you for bringing attention to this subject. So the more specific your needs, the more likely you are to stay in the temporary accommodation. And I mean, I don't want to squeeze out people like Siobhan or indeed like that texter who are telling their stories, but if someone wants to have a crack at why we are so bad. Look, if we were the worst in the developed world by a couple of points, it would perhaps be an unnecessary question, an unnecessary conversation. But the second place country is just over 30 homeless households per 10,000 or per 10,000 people. And we are over 50. That's a massive lead. I mean, a truly huge lead. Why? What's happened? 11:31 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headlines. It is as I thought. My thanks to Barry for explaining this. He writes, James, I'm a housing officer. I see this situation every day. The problem is that the council doesn't have much housing supply. Pause. I've also got text pointing out that this goes back to last week's discussion about right to buy and about the depletion of social housing stock or council housing stock. It's decimated, leaving those on the edge in the hands of landlords and the market. So those two texts between them, Keith with an F and Barry, combined to create a really clear... Sorry, not Barry, Bob, combined to create a really clear situation where private landlords are charging on a nightly basis. So shortage of long-term or temporary accommodation, writes Bob, and therefore properties that could be on the market, could be part of the actual housing stock for a normal rent, are going to be a lot more lucrative for landlords when they are, if you like, leased to the council for nightly stays at a much higher rate than you'd get. It's like the difference between being an Airbnb and being a rental property. but obviously at the other end of the market. The private property market is a business, and the council doesn't have the supply. So that's exploitation in a nutshell. Beautifully explained, albeit grimly. In fact, to lighten the tone, I've remembered something we haven't done for ages. I thought as the run-up to the election began, it would be kind of redundant because it would be happening every day. But we've possibly found the finest example yet. We did start making a list of these. Did you lose it? Did we keep the list of these? I did ask for a list to be kept. Sorry, I'm just having a private conversation with the producer now. I did ask for a list to be kept. Have we got it? What do you mean it might be there somewhere? You can't run a radio programme on those sort of... it might be there somewhere. It should be at your fingertips. The list of...
Sneak here, sneak here, sneak here.
I love that one. Why is that one so good, Keith, compared to all the other ones? Is that because someone else did it? Oh, that was the one when we did the competition, wasn't it? Not in-house. Oh, I'm really alienating my colleagues today. Oh, no, it's how to win friends and influence people. But can we do that one again? Because it's so good.
Sneak here, sneak here, sneak here.
What do you think the Mail have got on Keir Starmer today? This is big. This is big. He ate some chicken. I should probably explain a little more, shouldn't I? So not only did Keir Starmer, who is usually pescatarian, eat some chicken, but this information was actually revealed in a biography published about 2 months ago, because we had Tom Baldwin in the studio when it came out. How long ago was it published? So, I mean, quite how this is a news story, God and the Daily Mail only know. So he was on Sunday Brunch yesterday. Is that the one with Tim Lovejoy? I really like that one. I think Tim Lovejoy is a brilliant presenter. And he was cooking some tandoori salmon. And for some reason that is not explained in this article, the Daily Mail have elected to print a photograph of him on Sunday Brunch cooking some tandoori salmon alongside the revelation that was revealed in a biography published 2 months ago, that when he was coming back from an event in Sheffield, his team bought some takeaway food, and as they were getting onto the late night train, he realised that he'd been given some chicken. I wasn't going to get anything else at that time of night, he told his biographer in a book published some months ago, so I ate every morsel, and very good it tasted too. And that is a news story in the Daily Mail under the headline, Flip-flop Keir won't eat meat, but says he's had chicken. So don't vote for Keir Starmer, because he once ate some chicken when he was very hungry. So we got 2 versions of that, like the intro and the outro. Did you do that all by yourself? That's brilliant. I like that. We should do more smear Keirs just for the musical interlude, the pleasure of the music. We like. Oh, here you go. So here is a list of smear Keirs that has been carefully curated in a purpose-built archive. So far we have got, he bought a field for his disabled mother to keep donkeys in. And then when he sold it, he made some money. That is number 1. Number 2, he once ate a curry in Durham in breach of absolutely no rules whatsoever, but it got about 13 front pages out of the Daily Mail. He once worked as a lawyer and did some lawyering with some clients who needed a lawyer. He likes the Ode to Joy, Beethoven's Ode to Joy. He likes it. These have all been written up as negative news stories about Keir Starmer. Something about the death penalty that I can't remember. He once said on the telly that he has 2 sons when in fact he has a son and a daughter. That's a terrible slip of the tongue. National news in the Daily Telegraph. Do you know that he once, and this one is quite serious, this is quite a big smear, he once helped his sister buy a house. I think his sister's a nurse as well, so it just gets worse. He is a racist, it was argued, in I think the Telegraph again, because he said that Rishi Sunak doesn't get Britain. That's Rishi Sunak, who, I'm delighted to tell you, is £120 million richer this year than he was last year. It's possible that when Keir Starmer suggested that level of wealth means it's rather hard to understand the concerns of ordinary British people, it's possible that's what Keir Starmer was referring to, although right-wing newspapers pretended to believe that he was referring to Rishi Sunak's ethnicity. So that was a good smear Keir. And finally, the very latest smear Keir is he ate some chicken once and told his biographer about it in a desperate attempt to keep the story secret. And that concludes... Can we do it again? No, we've done... Shall we? Yeah. It's the only jingle that I've got a dance for as well, I'd say. 11:41, don't forget on YouTube something. What? Subscribe. Ring that bell. Hooray. You can watch the whole show on YouTube these days. Not live. It comes up a little later. But it's fun because you get to see me pulling absolutely outrageous faces when I forget that the cameras are in the studio. Let's get back to temporary accommodation. And the question of what it's like and, if you're up for it, why this country is so awful. Martin is in Dover. Martin, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi.
Hello, mate.
I was evicted in March the 7th, and luckily enough, I live with my daughter who's under 18, so the council were obliged to help us.
Yes.
And I ended up in temporary accommodation. Now it's okay.
You're still there now, are you?
Yeah. We're still here now. We've no idea how long. I've still got debts to sort out.
Okay.
I haven't worked in nearly 2 years.
Right.
With depression and anxiety.
Oh.
But living in temporary accommodation, I think someone mentioned a similar situation to me earlier.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like a home. I don't like being in.
Yeah.
And that's difficult in my situation because I don't like going out.
No.
So I'm in a bit of a situation, but I'll get through it in the end. But it's my age. I'm 65.
Right.
I feel like a failure. I mean, for no real fault. Don't get ill in this country. Don't get certainly not mentally ill, as with depression and anxiety, because I never saw a doctor for a year after getting it. It was all phone calls. I struggle on the phone. It took me because it was temporary accommodation and not rough sleeping. I decided to phone in.
Yeah, thank you.
I am shaking here.
I can hear it in your voice. I can hear it in your voice, but it's important that people know what it's like out there, and you're getting it from all angles, Martin, because of course Mel Stride, the Work and Pension Secretary, is on a campaign at the moment to poo-poo people who can't work because of their mental health. He thinks you're all swinging the lead, doesn't he? Yeah,
that's right. And then you hear, like you keep saying, the good news today is he's another £120 million.
Yeah,
well, I'm really chuffed for him. I get my universal credit tomorrow, £245. So that'll put me back in the back, but for about £45. So,
right.
And then it's sort of living on my overdraft until I get my next payment.
And until you can rustle up a deposit or until you're solvent again, you're not going to be able to.
I'm also dealing with. I'm not going to say who it is, but pension or firms that deal with private pensions. Yeah, and they, once you get through all the initial hassle, it's going to take another 2.5 months to get my money, if you like.
I do understand, but so there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully,
it's just getting through this.
How's your daughter getting on, Martin? If you don't mind me asking,
she's brilliant. She's doing it. She's got an A-level exam today. She's doing brilliant. She doesn't want to go to a university yet, but that's okay. I don't force them into doing. My son and his girlfriend and my grandson, they're in temporary accommodation.
Good Lord.
It's amazing. It's obscene how many people are in temporary accommodation.
And I presume, just looking at all the stories coming in today, I presume that your last place, you left it under a no-fault eviction.
That's right, yeah.
So you're about. I mean, if I include text as well as calls, that's pretty much everybody who's been in touch today.
Yeah, and it's that as well as no social housing.
Yeah,
I think I listened to your housing thing last week, and someone said the things that were done on there, and that's the reason why you've got this obscene.
Yeah, and there are people, as there always will be, moving into the space created. I mean, and to make money, people who would rather be getting the premium rates for the temporary accommodation than getting the market rate for a normal rental. You hang in there, Martin. Yeah, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Thanks very much. I love your show. So,
hey, well, you take care of yourself. All right? I'll keep you company if you're stuck in there. I'll keep you company every day. All right.
Thanks, James. That's
all right,
brilliant.
You stay
Take
safe.
care, mate. Bye.
Seriously, it's 11:46. It's 11:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the conversation is about homelessness and about temporary accommodation, not about sleeping rough. And I don't like it when this happens because it is I kind of evidence, and I shouldn't have been surprised, but goodness me, there's a lot of it about, and we knew there was a lot of it about because the United Kingdom is by an incredible distance the worst place in the developed world for homelessness. It has by far the highest rate of homelessness in the developed world. So that's 2 hours today on the radio. In the first hour, we pointed out that we are spending £5 billion to make it harder on a border regime that will make it harder for British businesses to do business, and then charging them £7.5 billion a year to negotiate it. Right? In the second hour of the programme, we are reflecting upon the fact that the United Kingdom has by far, that phrase by far is the one that slaps, I don't know why, it has by far the highest rate of homelessness in the developed world. Luckily, the failed mayoral candidate, Susan Hall, has been in touch. She wrote this morning, as sure as night follows day, if you accidentally tune into LBC after 10, O'Brien is either complaining about Brexit or Boris. He is like a broken record. Susan Hall, of course, as an Assembly member and a councillor for Harrow, would be very well qualified to comment on why so many people in this country are living in temporary accommodation. Indeed, as a councillor in Harrow, she would presumably be well aware that Britain has by far the highest rate of homelessness in the developed world. But if you're hoping for any help from Councillor Hall, the fact that she hasn't yet worked out how to operate a radio suggests that she's unlikely to be able to help you negotiate the vagaries of the housing system. Do you know, I think, I can't be bothered to check, but you can if you want. Hasn't she claimed before that she'd accidentally tuned into this programme? Am I going mad? Have I got déjà vu? Didn't Susan Hall claim that didn't she claim she'd accidentally tuned in before? I mean, to tune in accidentally once is careless. But two begins to look like, well, I don't know, pant-wettingly stupid. It's 11:52 is the time. Joe's in Greenwich. Joe, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, good morning, James.
Hello,
I picked up the phone because this is something that I've been dealing with for about the past 4 or 5 months.
Nice.
I've lived in temporary accommodation for about 4 years.
Right.
I'm living in temporary accommodation because I can't afford private rent. So I've started working full-time and been working full-time only until you're in debt. They'll write to you and say, okay, so you're in this amount of arrears. And I said, okay, so I've come up with a payment plan, continue working full-time. For them to contact me and said, okay, you're now in arrears with housing benefit because you're no longer entitled to housing benefit because you're working above the threshold.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. Come up with a payment plan.
So this is arrears on your last property, is it?
Yeah, so the property I'm currently living in. So I'm in arrears with housing benefit and I'm in arrears.
And why did you lose the home you were in 4 years ago, if you don't mind me asking?
Okay, so what happened? I've lived in this country for over 2 decades.
Yeah.
My status was irregularized, so I was struggling anyway by any means to pay private rent until my family said, okay, your status is now regularized. You can no longer live with us.
Right.
So I'm in private temporary accommodation.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
Lordy. So which working full-time and you just...
anyway, because I've had all my children here, and until my papers got on someone's desk who had a bit of sense, they're like, but you've lived there for most of your life. So why are we about to deport you? But that's another story for another day.
You've not had a good easy time of it, have you? So how long have you been in the actual property that you're in now?
The actual 3 years.
Oh, so how is that temporary then? If you forgive me for not understanding, how is that temporary?
Because you can be in temporary accommodation, they say, for up to 10 years. I'm bidding. I can only bid on one property.
So this isn't a social housing project. This would never be permanent for anybody. This is somewhere where they put people with children because that makes you a priority while you try to secure permanent housing. And because you can't secure permanent housing, you stay there, but without any sense of permanence, even though 3 years is longer than some people stay in a permanent place.
And that is it. They say they can move you at any time, so I can't really make it to home. I'm worried. Okay, so you can move me outside. Can you move me outside the area to a permanent? Because I've got 3 children, 3 different ages.
Yes,
and what I'm
they usually are. They could have been twins, I suppose, Joe, but they usually are 3 different ages, 3 children.
Yeah,
aren't they?
Yeah. So yes, they are usually, but it's the security of having to move them, because I've done that already, whereas I've moved school and that school isn't suitable for my son. And then I have to move him to another school in a few months' time just to find a school that's suitable for him.
So many different things to take into account. So what do the council say? I mean, I don't want to...
They say now that I have to pay my full rent, which is more than half my salary a week.
Because now working, you don't qualify for the housing benefit because you've gone over the threshold, so you're going to be worse off.
Yes, so it's the sacrifices I have to make. I'm not here for my children because I'm a single parent, and then I have to, because I work shift work, I have to find someone, for example, when I have a shift that finishes at 3 a.m., they say I have to find a certified childminder in order for them to assist me with that. So I have to find someone privately, and that's not considered because they're not a registered childminder.
And how much hope have you got that you'll find somewhere to live after 3 years, and you're bidding for everything you can bid for?
Hope. And then I can't, the properties that I'm bidding on, let's say they won't accept me because I'm in arrears anyway, so I have to clear up the arrears before I can move into a permanent property. The rent for those properties are half the price of what I'm currently paying privately as they request I do.
Oh,
so
man alive.
And now I've requested to work part-time for things to be a little bit easier on me. And now I'm just depressed because now working part-time, I won't be able to clear the arrears, and I'm still still required to contribute something towards the rent, which I don't have a problem doing it, but it's like I'm working full-time thinking that I'm making a better life for my family, and it's just, okay, I'm hit with this, I'm hit with that, and there is just no respite in it.
I can hear that in your voice.
So I hope they can, and if I contact the job centre, all they can say to me, we can't consider that. The best you can do is write to your MP. My MP isn't going to pay my bills for me and clear up my arrears.
No, but I mean, it's still worth doing. I know we give politicians quite a hard time on this programme, but some of the constituency work that some MPs do, I can't off the top of my head remember who it would be where you are, but it can't make anything worse, can it?
I'll try.
It's got to be worth it.
At this moment, I'm trying, but
because you are doing what they've told you to do. You know, the arrears notwithstanding, they're doing what they told you to do. You were trying to work and trying to pay your way out of trouble and looking for a place, and yet it's as if every step forward you manage to take, they push you back. They push you back too, and it will be no consolation whatsoever to you, Joe. But there are so many people in your position that any stigma or shame that would have been attached to it has been completely washed away by the Tories inflicting this kind of experience upon thousands and thousands and thousands of families. It's quite extraordinary, actually. It really is. I wish I could say something more uplifting or encouraging, but my phones have gone nuts. I wasn't expecting that. Maybe everyone's tuned in by accident again, like Susan Hall. Joe, take care. David's in York with what will probably be the last word on this, and I don't have very long, David. What did you want to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call.
Very welcome.
Slightly embarrassed, first-time caller, really nervous, but just felt so empowered to phone in. I'm literally about to be made homeless in 2 weeks' time. So the short story is, worked all my life, 35 years, project manager, COVID comes along, lose my job, miss furlough, went and got a lesser job to try and get me through. And then all of a sudden we get to this trust scenario. My mortgage went from £200 a month to £1,200 a month over a 14-month period.
Right.
Everything got too much, and cut a long story short, I've got an eviction notice, which should have been May the 2nd.
So it's a repossession then?
It's a repossession. I've been in the house 35 years.
Oh, mate.
So basically, mortgage, £200 a month, single man, perfectly okay. In 14 months, it's gone up to $1,250.
Can't do it.
I went from project managing on a pretty good salary down to doing .com driving, which I loved, but it didn't pay the same.
No, of course.
So
what happens then? Who do you ring? Who have you been in touch with?
Every day, I spend about 4 or 5 hours on the phone. We've got a very good network of people in the local vicinity that will help get you in touch with the right people. That then takes you to a thing in York called Housing Solutions, which is part of the county council.
Right.
They do an assessment of you, and then they come up with a plan. So I've had my assessment, and they've come up with a plan.
Yeah.
The end of it is you're homeless. There is no temporary accommodation until I've been homeless. Have the email. Anybody's more than welcome to see it.
Right.
It's heartbreaking. There's me and my poor border collie.
So they can't help you until you are homeless?
The getting into a hostel thing doesn't become available until I'm homeless.
So they can't set anything up in advance?
There's nothing.
Are you scared?
I'm shaking talking to you. I'm petrified.
I'm sorry.
Not only that, I've got 35 years of my house, my possessions.
Yeah.
The day I get evicted, that's classed as abandonment. I lose it all, and I've got nowhere to put it. And I've been told by the council, well, just put it into storage.
Which is expensive and easier said than done.
Yes, it's an impossible situation.
So have you got family or anyone who can help you?
Family help to a degree, but I've got my family's away from where I am.
Okay.
So that's not necessarily an easy option.
No.
But all I can say is, in my situation, I would spend as much time on the phone now as well as working, trying to get this sorted out with people like shelter.
Yes.
But the key thing for me, which I felt was really important, especially being a male when most of your callers have been female, because I do feel there's a difference if if I'm a single male, you do get treated
being single, it's the big difference, because Martin was clearly a bloke, but because his daughter's 17 and still with him, it puts him in a completely different category from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're the sole carer, the single carer for a child, then the council will just... I mean, you understand why. It's not necessarily fair, but if they have to make...
like I said, even in my situation, there's people out there that are in a worse situation than me. But I think that what's hurt more than anything was that plan, that assessment, where I was supposed to get people coming to try and help.
Yeah.
I should have been evicted on May the 2nd. I got a phone call last week from the council to see how I was getting on, because they didn't know that I'd already got the breathing space. It gave me the extra 60 days, which takes me to the middle of June.
Yeah.
And that breathing space, that's just on the phone all the time, trying to talk to these various people.
Trying to work it out, trying to find trying to have somewhere to go on the day that the keys get handed over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, honestly, it's just, and the hardest thing about all this is you try and keep yourself going, you try and be positive, you wake up in the morning and you go again, and at the end of the day, you're no further forward.
Oh, mate, I feel for you. I really do. And I mean, it's not much, but at least people know the reality of what you're going through now, and it is far from just you. There are so many people having similar experiences, and that's why I began this hour by talking about the fragility of our grip on the hamster wheel, just that succession of bad luck there. COVID, of course, being the catalyst, but then the economic collapse brought about in large part by Liz Truss's budget. And it's people like David, of course, that pay the consequences while she swans off around the world with people like Steve Bannon. It's just not fair. It is 7 minutes after 12. I love coming in for David and of course offers for help, but I can't. I mean, there was a time when we would get involved, but we've had our fingers burnt. We can't anymore. 2 reasons. Number one is that dishonest people take advantage of good people. For a minute suggesting David falls into that category. But the other is that we've done it in the past, and it becomes, if the people that we help turn out not to be honest, people use it to attack us. It's quite incredible, really. I don't know how unpleasant you have to be in your darkest places to almost celebrate when people do good or try to do good, and then it turns out the person you were trying to help is undeserving of your support. People use it to attack the person that tried to help. It's quite, of all the weird stuff that happens in the sort of social media era, which hadn't really begun in earnest when I started this job. That's how old I am, children. I think that's the one I find weirdest. So the plumber who was investigated by the BBC last week had received quite a lot of money from Hugh Grant, and people used that to attack Hugh Grant when it turned out that the plumber had wasn't quite as he appeared to be. Let's say. Why would you attack the anyway? That's the nature of some people, if you like, in the internet era. So I can't. There's nothing we can do. You can tell by my voice. It hurts me, kills me actually. But that is where we are now. 9 minutes after 12. Laura in Renfrew, who I saw actually on Saturday night in Glasgow. She's been in touch to say, what are you talking about this hour? I seem to have tuned in by accident. Has anyone found the evidence that Susan Hall has tuned in to this programme by accident before? Has anyone looked? So I'm sure of it. I can't be imagining it. But we're going to have a slightly different conversation now. But not for the full hour, because the investigation into the contaminated blood scandal, the infected blood inquiry, which is, I mean, it's embargoed until 12:30, but I think we can all, with some confidence, say it will be even worse than you dared fear. I'm going to read you something that Sheila posted a moment ago, because it's absolutely on the money. Sheila, of course, will be with you at 1 when no doubt this subject will return. But there's that I'm not going to be able to find it now, am I? There are echoes of Hillsborough to the infected blood inquiry, and perhaps the loudest echo is the fact that it would not have got to this stage. The search for justice would have ended were it not for the determination of families to secure justice. It's an unbelievable story, and we will be learning all of the details from about 12:30 onwards. That's when Charlotte Lynch, who has had early looks at the embargoed report, will join us, and subsequently the press conference itself will begin, scheduled for about 12:40, and I'm minded at the moment to have a proper look at it, i.e. to take it live. But so 2 stories, right, which I'm going to put next to each other. I read last week, and I haven't got this one in front of me, about the big surge in children not going to school on Fridays. Did you see that? So that is linked to parents working from home. So I don't know if you use public transport in a big town or city, but if you, like me, rely on public transport to get to and from work, you can, if you wake up in a daze, by the time you get to the station or the bus stop, you can pretty much work out what day of the week it. Well, you can certainly guarantee that it's Friday, because the volume of passengers, the school children don't change measurably in my experience, but the volume of passengers, you can tell that the number of people who are working from home on a Friday is significant enough to, for example, almost guarantee that you'll get a seat on the train or on the London Underground. But it turned out, and this was a report, I can't remember whether it had numbers in it, whether it had statistics in it. We'll find out shortly. But the contention certainly was that children are not going to school on Fridays because they are staying at home with their parents who are working from home. So you're almost having, I don't know what level of work you do from home to fit with this analysis, but you're almost having an extended weekend. So that means that some children who aren't going to school on Fridays are swinging the lead. That's one of my favourite phrases, as you may have noticed. But this sits rather uncomfortably for me alongside my conviction that the massive majority of children classed as severely absent, the massive majority of children who are not going to school, will be in need of help and support, not in need of heavy-handed crackdowns. So the Observer reported yesterday that head teachers say they're now under intense pressure from the government to turn around this crisis in attendance. About 150,000 children at state schools classed as severely absent. And the Department of Education now demanding attendance records and threatening to send police to homes of absent pupils with threats to jail their parents. Every time I think this government can't do anything stupider than the last stupid thing it did, along they come with something really stupid. I had a producer, I told you this, the first producer I ever had on this programme, and for reasons I never actually worked out, I should have asked him more questions. He was obsessed with this story. This was 20 years ago. He was obsessed with truants and the idea that a mum can force a teenage boy to go to school, particularly a single mum, or even a dad, but you think of a single mum who, let's say, is 5'2" in her stockinged feet, and she's got a 16-year-old son who's decided he's not going to go to school anymore, or he's certainly not going to go to school this week. What can she do? Physically, she can do nothing. I mean, in this day and age, and I think this counts as progress, you can't really physically coerce a child to do something that they don't want to do. What are you going to do to force this child to go to school who won't? And that's truculence, stroke truant. I don't have the figures, but I suspect that truculent stroke truant accounts for a tiny minority of these people. It's something that I know a little bit about because my wife works in the arena of child therapy. And children who can't stroke won't go to school are not the children of our imaginings, or they are not the children of lazy tabloid journalism. They are children who are crippled with the sort of anxiety that Martin was talking to us about in the last hour in the context of temporary homelessness. They're crippled with the sort of anxiety stroke depression that means they struggle to get out of bed, let alone get out of the house. And we know that this has got a heck of a lot worse in recent years because it's happened to adults as well. So there's also, the added dimension of children who don't fit into the conventional schools model and they need help. The co-founder of a lobbying and support group for children like that told the Observer yesterday, parents have told us about very strict schools actually forcing entry into their homes. Schools themselves, maybe it's wrong to blame this on the government, are turning up with community police. They're shouting up the stairs to highly anxious children, demanding they come into school now. So, I would like you to tell me about why your child is not going to school. But I want you to do it from the perspective of being still almost unable to believe that it's happened to you. I don't mean that in a snobby way, and I know it's a bit similar to the question that I asked about homelessness, and also the Friday story might be different as well, because Friday, if the child finds school a torture, and then on Fridays, because you're working from home, you can actually say don't go in. But the figure is 20% higher on Fridays than Wednesdays, which does suggest a little bit of lead swinging on the part of irresponsible parents. So they perhaps would get frightened into saying to your child you're going to school on Friday by the threat of an intervention like this. But for the massive majority, I believe the child wants to go to school. And I believe the parent wants the child to go to school. And most, if not all mornings, you actually try to go to school, but you can't. I want you to tell us what that's like. But I want to put you at the front of the queue. If you can't quite believe that it's happened to you, maybe you were a little bit, what's the word I want? Maybe you were a little bit prejudiced about this issue. You sort of thought, if I had done this on the radio 5 years ago and I'd come on with the kind of attitude that I fear I probably would have had before therapy myself, I'd have been like, well, this is outrageous. The only language they understand, come on, crack the whip, get them out of bed. And some nonsense about being an adult with a difficult job and having to do. I'm just completely ignoring the existence of anxiety and depression. If I had been like that before I had therapy, which I would have been because it was part of my survival personality, to pretend that you could sort of bluster bloviate your way out of any problem, you might have nodded along. You might have sat there and gone, yeah, he's right, I'm sure there are some kids who've got mental health issues, but the massive majority are just staying at home to play Call of Duty. But now you know that's not true because of what has happened to you. And yours is the call that I want. I'm not going to have long to take it, actually. So if I have just described you, 0345 6060 973, the parent who used to think or used to be susceptible to the lazy tabloid stereotype of the school refuser versus you today knowing what it's actually like because it's happened in your house and it's bloody awful. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And if you hit those numbers now, you will get through. It is 21 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the conversation about children not going to school will be unrecognisable to anyone familiar with the lazy, knee-jerk, nasty tabloid approach to this issue, which is to usually call for the parents to be punished or the children to be sort of whipped down the stairs in the morning. You used to be like that, right? And I can say that because I did. That's easy. Of course it is. Then you discover reality. And reality is, of course, the sworn enemy of lazy tabloid journalism. So what's it actually like to find yourself in this sort of situation? And that's the child who can't go. The child who won't go does exist. Kelly knows what I'm talking about. She's just written to say, James, you are literally talking about me. I'm 5'2" and my son is 5'11", and some days he will just refuse to get up for school. My husband leaves the house before we all get up for work, so he can't help. My son's got no reason for not wanting to go in. It's just that some days he can't be bothered, and it can happen on any day of the week. What can Kelly do? That's not the question. I'm just acknowledging the existence of that reality before we explore the reality of the parent that wants their child to go to school and the child who wants to go to school, but somehow it just doesn't and won't happen. James is in East Grinstead. James, what would you like to say?
Yeah, you described me to a T when you were talking just now. Probably 6-7 years ago, I'd have been the first person to say, stiff upper lip, get them in. You're going in whether you like it or not. Exactly. Tough love.
Yeah.
And
from a good place. From a good place because you believed it.
Yeah, and I've too bought into the tabloid journalism. There's probably thousands of truant kids running around with parents on benefits, blah blah blah. And it obviously, that changed for me when I had a daughter. She's now 8. She suffers from severe anxiety. She was diagnosed with ADHD last year, which we think is probably the cause of that anxiety.
They often go hand in hand. The masking can be so exhausting, can't it? And the rest of it.
When she does go into school, she goes in and, she'll get herself dressed and she's up and we're like, brilliant, this is a good day. But, probably 2 days out of 5 every week, it's flat out tantrums and, crying. I help when I can. Obviously, if I have to leave to go to work early, I can't help, and my wife's left to do it on her own. But, just getting her even into the car at home, the journey all the way there in tears, and then literally being stuck to my wife, when they get there. Yeah. There's only so much you can do. We can never be physical, obviously. So, and we wouldn't want to be.
No,
but
I understand.
How much school can she miss, before it becomes, a real issue?
A long-term setback. How helpful, how understanding of the school?
They're actually we actually have a good school. Yeah. They're very understanding to a point. Getting help for EHCP and all those kind of things is a real struggle now. Unless it's seen as a gateway to money.
That's next on the hit list. I would predict, because the number of children that need EHCPs, which is a care plan for children with special educational needs or mental health issues, that's rocketing because the system can't cope. So the parents like you have little choice but to seek an EHCP when once you might have come to an accommodation or a better arrangement with SEN teachers or assistants or the school itself. So the government, if they haven't already, they'll be targeting EHCPs before the year is out.
They already have. I mean, that's the thing. Last week I was listening to Gillian Keegan talk to Nick Ferrari about, how amazing and how much money they'd spent on SEN and what, the increase in spending. Yet, I'm in Surrey. Yeah. Surrey have closed diagnosis for autism and has done since, I think it was August last year, so there's no referrals allowed.
Because they're just they're inundated, and CAMS will have a 12-month waiting list, or maybe not in Surrey, but in 2 years in other parts. But hey, good old Gillian Keegan playing a blinder. She doesn't get the credit she deserves, does she? As she often observes.
No, I was sitting there listening to her. She's obviously not talking about our area because we've, and we had a letter that came out last week. My other daughter's a specialist SEND school for autism, and they've just been told all their growth plans, they were going to add 2 more years to add a sixth form onto the school, which had already been agreed, and they've just been told their funding's now under review and they can't proceed. So this is the same,
It's another one of those things that I kind of find myself wondering whether Keir Starmer is mad for wanting to be Prime Minister of a country that has got so much to do, so much to undo, and so much to fix. James, thank you for your honesty, mate. I don't have long on this because of the infected blood scandal report dropping in just a few minutes. Otherwise, I would talk to you for a little longer, and I hope we can talk again. But it's the perfect illustration of what I was trying to describe. The parent who falls for the lazy, knee-jerk tabloid response because you know nothing about it, and then suddenly you're on an unwanted crash course in the reality of it, and you realise the truth is, as is often the case with lazy tabloid journalism, is the polar opposite of the prejudice. Take care, mate. Catherine's in Thurrock. Catherine, what made you pick up the phone?
I was just driving along listening to your station, and it just tuned in exactly to my current situation with my son.
Go on.
He just went into year 7 in September.
Right.
Following a recent separation from myself and his dad.
Okay.
I think he would struggle anyway. He's never been a boy that really loved school, but he's a very bright boy, so school can be quite boring for him.
Yes.
And a lot of the work they do is, he works at a faster pace. So I think he would struggle anyway, but couple it with what he's gone through. It's
not a great phone line, Catherine. I'm really sorry.
Oh, is it not?
No, I don't know what you've done since. I'll try and improve it while I talk to Guy, who's in Louth, but I can't. It's just not quite kicking. Guy, what would you like to say? Oh, it could be us. Might be our fault, not Catherine's. Guy, can you hear me? Oh, there's another one that's gone funny as well. This is very interesting from Dickie, who says, I was at school in the noughties and had a lot of friends who were in care. The fact is they were more likely not to attend than the kids who lived with parents. The government is sharing a single brain cell at the moment if they really think that pursuing or imprisoning parents will help. It's 28 minutes after 12. We'll have a quick word with Ben in Durham. Ben, what made you pick up the phone?
Basically, I've got 4 children with additional needs, autism, ADHD. The system here is quality first teaching, where the children with SEND needs go through mainstream first.
Yeah.
Problem there is the mainstream do not have the knowledge in order to identify the needs. They fall on stigmas and
and they may have had it 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but it's one of the things that was stripped out by austerity. So does that mean that your children some days don't go?
They have no support to the point, especially with social situations, things like that, to the point they refuse to go on a regular basis. There's been days we've had to carry them in the pyjamas, quite regular.
Wow.
And the school basically seem to blame the parents and want to penalise the parents for their failures. They don't want them to even acknowledge their failures at the minute. And the local authority do not offer the support they should.
So you're part of these statistics? And you'd give anything not to be. The last thing on earth you want to be is part of these statistics.
Yeah. We actually got threats from the school, and it was only some of the support services we did have in place that turned around and said, if that goes to court, they'd be laughed out of the place because...
So you're ahead of the game on this one then. They've come for you quite robustly, thinking that somehow you're choosing this course or that you could somehow be doing more because the government's putting pressure on them because of their attendance records, and therefore they're responding for good or for ill in the way that you're describing.
Even when it's recognised that being in that setting has been causing them significant damage.
Jeez.
That's why it's a farce to blame the parents when you can offer support instead of penalising them.
But they haven't got the support to offer. I'm not making excuses for the school.
No, there isn't.
But they've been cut to the bone because of austerity. Now they've got the same party, of course, that brought us austerity, insisting that they fix this problem that in large part they've helped to create. And because the schools can't fix the problem, instead they're asking for attendance records and they're going to send community police round to your house.
Yeah, it's the local authority has a legal obligation to children with additional needs. They're failing that and then penalising the parents and threatening the parents, which does not work.
Well, this is you're a canary down the coal mine, Ben, I think, and I wish you weren't, but I'm grateful to you for ringing in to share your experiences. It's just gone 12:30. That infected blood inquiry is dropping, for want of a better word, as we speak. Charlotte Lynch is across all of the details, and we're expecting the press conference to begin at about 20 to 1. So all of that coming up next on LBC. First, though, Amelia Cox is here with your headlines. 12:34 is the time. It is, I think, by any measure, the biggest scandal in the history of the NHS. It is also the latest, if you like, in a series of scandals of secrecy as well as malfeasance. You might think of Bloody Sunday. You probably think of the Post Office. You'd certainly think of Hillsborough. In fact, a rather splendid report on Channel 4 News last night that looked at the issue of Hillsborough syndrome. But today it is all about the families and the people affected by infected blood, as the infected blood inquiry report is published. Be clear about one thing, though. This is about finding the truth for campaigners and victims, or getting a lot closer to the truth. Justice remains very, very far away, although with today's publication, it will inexorably move a little bit closer. But this is not about justice. This is about the truth. Charlotte Lynch has had early access to this report, although it's a hefty document, so there's no earthly way she would have been able to read all of it. She joins me now from outside Central Hall in Westminster. Charlotte, what can you tell us?
James, it's seismic, to say the least. It found a subtle, pervasive and chilling cover-up of the infected blood scandal by the NHS and successive governments who sought to hide the truth of this treatment disaster. 30,000 people in the UK were infected with HIV and hepatitis B and C after they were given blood and blood products contaminated with it between the 1970s and the early 1990s. But the final report of this inquiry found that there was a deliberate suppression of the truth and a deliberate destruction of relevant documents that would expose that. In fact, patients were knowingly exposed to the risks of infections it was known about before most of them were treated, in the case of hepatitis, since the end of World War II. And many Department of Health files containing material dealing with delays in the introduction of screening of these blood donations were destroyed. They related to the decision-making of the Advisory Committee and the virological safety of blood. Those were marked for destruction in 1993, which the chairman of the inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff, said was not an accident. It also found a litany of failures from government. They had full knowledge from early 1975 that blood was being collected from prisons in almost all transfusion centres in the UK, but there was no action taken to stop or even to discourage it. And it said to save face and to save money, successive governments refused to admit responsibility and showed little interest in finding the truth and taking action. They should have taken action, it said, in 1983, and that's being generous, when at the beginning of the year, evidence emerged of haemophiliacs in the US being infected with HIV. The Department of Health were also warned mid-1983 that they should temporarily withdraw US blood products, but that was not brought to the attention of ministers, and it wasn't brought to the attention of the chief medical officer. Now, throughout the whole of 1983, a line was used by Ken Clarke as health minister that there was no conclusive proof that AIDS could be transmitted through blood or blood products. This report says that was misleading. Now, I've just been speaking to one of the survivors, Derek Martindale from southwest London. He was born a haemophiliac and he was infected through a transmission that he received after that in 1985.
I was infected in 1984-85. 18 months, 24 months before then, the warnings were going out about the risk. It was a false economy not to do anything in the sense of the money that's it's cost, but also, so many people died, so many people have suffered and are still suffering, still dying. And it wasn't an accident, it was intentional. The government and the departments involved are totally culpable on this.
And one of those people that died was Derek's younger brother. He died as a result of contracting AIDS. And when I asked Derek what justice would look like for him today, he said proper compensation. Now, the chair, Sir Brian Langstaff, has made clear in this report that he believes the chief responsibility lies with successive governments. And he says they should set a compensation scheme up now, even saying it was wrong for them to insist, as we've been hearing over the course of the last few days and years, that they should wait for the final publication of this report to provide a proper response and to come up with a proper compensation scheme. That was wrong, he said. They did not need to wait. Now, it also made clear, James, and this for me was the most disturbing part. We've heard so much about school children at Trelaw College who were infected at a haemophiliac centre. This report found evidence that research was conducted on those children. They were treated with multiple riskier commercial concentrates in a preventative manner. So some of them didn't even need the transfusions. It was completely unnecessary. And they were used as objects for research. And that happened in other places as well. Research conducted on haemophiliacs, including children, when they didn't know about it or didn't consent to it. These factor 8 blood products, they were called, that were imported from America, were being given to people in an experimental way without them knowing. That, no doubt, is going to be another, major factor that comes out from this that will need further examination at incredibly high levels, because for me to read that, it was one of the most disturbing things. But Sir Brian Langstaff making that key recommendation that a compensation scheme should be set up now. And just an important background point to note as well, this inquiry has not made a finding that criminal prosecutions should be sought, but that is because it can't. Legally, under the Inquiries Act, it cannot call for that. So that recommendation is not in here, but that is because legally it cannot make that finding.
We're expecting a couple of press conferences today, aren't we? Separate events by different groups of victims and campaigners, and I think one of them is about to start, Charlotte, so we may cross live imminently to take that. Whether or not we come back to you afterwards, only time will tell, but let's cross live now to that press conference.
I think I would like to echo those thoughts. I think everybody today has read of the disasters that unfolded, and Sir Brian has been very thorough and has not minced his words.
Sir Brian has told the truth today, and that's what's important, is that we carry on telling that truth, and so that this cover-up doesn't get covered up again. It's a really, really important day for that.
I would say, Jason, as well. For me, the key findings are that commercial factor products never should have been licensed for use. I think that was an incredibly strong finding of the report, and Sir Brian did what we hoped he would do, that he took the knowledge of this back to the 40s and 50s. This story did not begin in the 70s, and I think it's a credit to everybody that has campaigned on this over 3 or 4 decades.
Hello, everyone. It's Tom Clark from Sky News. Can I get your reaction to the report's conclusion that there is evidence of a cover-up by the Department of Health and others over the years since the initial wrongs happened right back in the 1970s and 80s?
I think I would say that my reaction to the fact that there has been a cover-up is that to our community, that's no surprise.
We've known that for decades, and now the country knows, and now the world knows as well. And the fact that Sir Brian has exposed that not only was there a cover-up, but there was a deliberate attempt to lie and to conceal, and not just by one person either. That this was systemic. This was by government, by civil servants, and by healthcare professionals. I think that really rocks what we think of as society and really challenges the trust that we put in people to look after us, to do their best and protect us. None of that can we take for granted anymore.
And I'd just like to add that I think that that the deliberate destruction of records echoes that.
It's also how we were treated as well. Sir Brian brings to the fore about how the trusts and schemes that were set up to support us have treated us as well. So this is not only a cover-up, it's actually an abuse by many people who were set to supposedly care for us.
Throughout the report, Sir Brian refers to that line, the best treatment possible was given to people. And we now know once and for all that that was a lie. People have been saying that was a lie for many, many years. And now we have the definitive word on that.
We've been gaslit for generations. This report today brings an end to that. And it looks to the future as well, and says that this cannot continue, this ethos of denial and cover-up, and that the duty of care for candour has to be reviewed going forward, so this can never happen again.
And people have lost decades of their life campaigning, and that has added to the trauma. Not only are you dealing with infection, dying, loss of family, loss of years and years of that have been wasted on this campaigning. It should never have happened. It should have been dealt with straight away.
And as I sit here as one of 27,000 blood transfusion victims, that's what echoes in my head. Behind every one of those 27,000 is a family.
Hi, Joe Pinkstone from the Daily Telegraph. I just wanted to ask you what you would say to the politicians in charge throughout the scandal and in charge now. There's some criticism of quite specific individuals in the report. I'd just like to get your thoughts on what you would say to them.
I think many of the politicians should hang their heads in shame. I think for the first time we've seen people like Jeremy Hunt and other health secretaries speak up recently and actually start to acknowledge their part in this scandal. Because no single person is responsible for this scandal. It's been the result of generations of denial, delay and cover-up. And whilst there might be an apology later today from the Prime Minister, it's not just the Prime Minister who holds responsibility and accountability for this. There are many others out there. And I would expect over the coming days and weeks for many more people to come forward and say sorry. I'm sorry for my part, and if they're genuinely sorry, they will help implement the recommendations that Sir Brian has recommended today.
And I think they need to know as well what they've been sorry for. Any apologies that we've had in the past have been meaningless, because all that they've said is that this should never have happened. We know that this should never have happened. What was your part in it? What are you sorry for? That's what the community needs to hear before we can even begin to get closure on this.
And not mess us around any longer.
I think the apology on behalf of the state will be welcome, and I think something else the community would like to see is a proper apology from all of the pharmaceutical companies that manufactured Factor 8 and 9 products as well, which includes Bayer, Baxter, Revlon Healthcare, Alpha, Abbot and their successors or subsidiaries.
Victoria MacDonald from Channel 4 News. It was made very clear that this inquiry could not recommend corporate manslaughter charges, could not go there. But do any of you think, or do you know if any complaints have been made officially to the police?
I'm not aware of any at the moment. I should say that as well as being the chair of the society, I'm a criminal barrister. And one of the aspects that sadly the delay has caused is the fact that there are doctors out there who should have been prosecuted for manslaughter, gross negligence manslaughter. doctors who were testing their patients for HIV without consent, not telling them about their infections, who then went on to sadly infect their partners, and they then went on to die. Those people should have been in the dock for gross negligence manslaughter. And sadly, because of the delay, that's one of the consequences, that so many people will not see justice as a result.
I'd like to add that extends to the politicians and the licence makers that licensed Factor 8 when there were clear warnings in place. This has gone on for so long now that the people that were around at the time will be very hard to track down if they're even still alive. And that's one of the testimonies of the cover-up and the delays in getting justice to this scandal, is the time that it's taken has meant that justice delayed really is, in this case, justice denied.
I think a lot of the villains in this story sadly have now died. In particular, on a clinical level, I would include Professor Arthur Bloom and Dr. Charles Ritzer, who were the two leading haemophilia care figures at the time, and for whom, if they were still alive today, I think there could well be a case for criminal charges. And that's just a testament to the fact that the government did not launch a public inquiry earlier. At the time it should have happened probably in the 90s.
I mean, in the report today, it says that there was enough public interest in this scandal for the inquiry to have been launched around 1986. Just think about the delay for a moment and think how many people could have been brought to justice at that point but haven't.
I think we need to be aware too of the deliberate destruction of records. The records, not just patient records, but records kept by the Department of Health, and that has become clear in the report that they were deliberately destroyed.
And also the evidence that was coming forward and being placed in front of government by campaigners that was dismissed. I think today is about the vindication of many of those campaigners, who some have sadly died, and I think that's what needs to be remembered, that this has been 40 years of cover-up and campaigning.
Can I add that there's an unprecedented aspect to this inquiry, because Sir Brian Langstaff has said that this is not his final word. He is not sending his final report to the government today. The recommendations that he's recommended, he said that the government will have to provide a report to Parliament within 12 months about those recommendations, saying whether or not they are going to implement them or explaining why they are not going to implement them, and he will expect them to account for that, which I think is unprecedented, because what the chair of the public inquiry is saying to government is, I don't trust you. And that's what the community have been saying for decades. I believe there should be a presumption in the Inquiries Act that recommendations from inquiries should be implemented unless government can provide good reasons why not. Why is it that we continue to have these burning injustices? Why is it in the United Kingdom we continue to have these scandals? It's because we ignore the recommendations of public inquiries, and that must stop today.
You are listening to LBC, where a press conference
Joe Pinkstone from the Daily Telegraph
victims
again.
and campaigners
I just wondered,
of the inflected blood scandal are currently holding a press conference, which we will continue to listen
while
in
the
on.
inquiry makes its final report. I wonder if you feel the final report is enough of a sense of justice, or if you'll be perhaps resuming legal action against the state.
In regards to the group litigation in my name against the Department of Health. That will very much, I think, depend on what the government does now, particularly in terms, it's a civil case, depending on how they come forth tomorrow with their proposals on compensation and what that looks like. I think that will go a long way in helping to decide what we do with that case next, and if we lift the stay. There are other litigations, such as the Trelaw litigation and other litigations going on as well, but I wouldn't be able to comment on those.
Hi, Emeline Van for Radio France International. What's the general feeling at the reading of this report? Is it relief, renewed anger, vindication?
I think for me, there's been a whirlwind of emotions today. I'm sure everybody on this table would agree with that. When you've been building up to a single day for 40 years, there's no wrong or right emotion about it. But for campaigners who have been doing this for so long, for saying the things that are now in this report for so long, I think relief, absolute relief, will be an overriding emotion, and that's certainly the case for me.
I think many feel that like this is the beginning of the end, because having had an excellent public inquiry, and we should commend the chair and his team for the inquiry, the ball is now in the government's court, and it will depend on the government response. And until we have a full government response in terms of compensation, all the other recommendations, it's only then we will be able to judge whether or not this inquiry has been successful or not.
Hi, my name's Emilio. I work for Politico. I have a question which is, obviously we've seen sort of some similarities with this recent post office scandal as well, where it seems like the politicians didn't really take it seriously enough, or potentially worse. Corporate wrongdoing potentially was brushed under the carpet. It's taken a really long time for people to notice that and to get to close to an end to that situation. Do you think, thinking about that and this situation, do we have a kind of wider problem with our society or our politics in terms of listening to people who have been wronged and getting things sorted quickly and trusting them, essentially?
That goes back to what I said earlier about the truth. This is the day of the truth, and it's up to society, up to you, the media, to ensure that that truth gets told and to keep coming back to it. Otherwise, we will be back in a situation, and millions of pounds of money that's been put into this inquiry would have been wasted.
Sorry.
After you.
I was just going to say, I think that that if we look back at this, it was cost that was a huge factor in why they bought in the American products, in why they didn't screen the blood for transfusion, and now cost is a factor yet again. Because it's going to cost much, much more, and has cost much, much more. And that's just in monetary terms, and I'm not thinking then of even the loss of life, which is the most unbearable cost.
Not only is the loss of life, that those people who are still infected need ongoing health and social care needs, and that needs to be addressed within any compensation package, and that needs to be talked about.
I think today sees the victory of truth over power, and you talk about the post office scandal and this scandal. Healthcare and the law are the twin pillars of our civil society, and they've both been rocked to their foundations by both of these scandals. Had this inquiry happened decades ago when it should have happened, might the post office scandal or large parts of it have been avoided? Possibly. And that's the real tragedy of this, that we continue not to learn from failures.
We've mentioned two scandals, this one and the post office. There are many others that coalesce around the Hillsborough Law Now campaign, which Andy Burnham started, such as the nuclear test veterans, Grenfell Tower fire, the story of Zane, who died as a result of toxic matter in a family household. There are so many of these campaigns, and they all need to be looked at.
I think the civil service has closed ranks around a lie for a long time in this inquiry, and I think the similar thing has happened in the Post Office and many of the other inquiries that Jason has just mentioned, and ministers sadly weren't given the truth, and I think that decision was made a long time ago, and money is at the source of it. It seems to be always at the source of it. And we know there were conversations in higher levels of government saying that if you compensate the haemophiliacs, then that sets a precedent. So let's not do it. And when you continue that line, that government line, and closing your ranks around denial, then this is the result of it, and the Post Office is the result of it, and we need systemic change and a duty of candour.
It's just gone 12:58. You were listening to a press conference that had been conducted by a collection of victims and campaigners in the infected blood scandal. Sue Wathen, Jason Evans, Andy Evans, Clive Smith and Claire Walton, the last of whom, as you heard, was drawing parallels quite rightly with previous scandals, including the Post Office one, which is still unfolding, but perhaps most obviously the Hillsborough scandal. Sheila will be returning to this territory shortly. Before that, I have some more breaking news for you, which is that the International Criminal Court is seeking arrest warrants for 3 Hamas leaders, as well as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Minister on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity over the October the 7th attacks on Israel and the subsequent war in Gaza. An expected but nonetheless extraordinary development in that story. That's it from me for today. Don't forget the Global Player for all your downloading, pausing and rewind needs. Ben Kentish is standing in for Tom Swarbrick at 4 o'clock today, but now it is time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 It is time